welcome back to another episode of the Miami Heat Roundtable. I'm your host, Amir, from the Team to Beat Miami Heat podcast. And for today's episode, we have Martel. You can find him at the Miami Heat Zone podcast. And we have another special guest joining us today on the roundtable. We have Greg Sylvander from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for hopping on, Greg.
Thank you for having me. It's been a long time coming that I get on the show, and I'm happy to be here. We can chop it up on some Miami Heat basketball.
Awesome. Appreciate your time again. So, Greg, the Miami Heat are not off to a good start, as we know. But luckily, the East is really bad right now. There's only 4 teams that are above 500, which is crazy. I had to check and see the West. There's 10 teams that are actually above 500, and 11th and 12th seed are both 500. So, luckily for the Miami Heat, we're the 5th seed, which I think is just unbelievable since we've had an up and down season so far. And my first question to you, Greg, is with the East being such a mess, do you think the Miami Heat can turn this around this season and avoid the play-in for the 3rd consecutive season?
I actually do think they can avoid the play-in, and it has a lot more to do with the fact that the Eastern Conference is such a mess than that the Heat have their stuff together. And I think that they can get to, at least if they can figure out a role for Terry. And I think that when he comes back here from injury, it'll be an interesting move to see if Spoelstra brings him off the bench. If they can figure out a role for Terry, the way Tyler's playing, if Jimmy can round into form, there's a way that they can finish in the top 6. They're 5th now, a game below 500. I wouldn't have predicted that would have got them the 5 seed. I don't know that it'll get them the 5 seed all season. So like that's another thing to consider, is that the East could get better as the season progresses. But right now it's forgiving enough to where I think they can get out of the play-in, but it has a lot more to do with that the parity in the East is so vast versus the Miami Heat have looked so great. Because as you kind of alluded to, it's been a rocky up and down start to the season. And I think a lot of it has to do with, kind of the head of the snake, Jimmy Butler, and his availability and such.
Yeah, which of the 3 teams, so just a quick follow-up, like we expected the Pacers, the Sixers, the Bucks to be ahead of us in that tier. And so which of those 3 do you think are you most confident will figure things out sooner than later?
Out of the Pacers, the Sixers, and the Bucks, you said?
Yeah, because those are 3 teams we thought would have been ahead of us, or we had to fight to leapfrog eventually to get into that 5 or 6 range. And
I'm with you.
All 3 of them are underperforming right now, especially the Sixers, which we gotta love to see. Obviously,
yeah,
the Bucks, they're figuring it out. I trust Giannis more than I trust Embiid, right?
I do.
So,
as much as we predicted that Milwaukee could fall off a cliff, I think of those 3 teams, that team will probably, quote unquote, figure it out most. I don't know what that looks like. Figure it out. Like the definition of that can mean a lot of different things. I also expect Indiana will figure out enough offensively to be relevant in the playoff push and be a team that is vying for a seed out of the play-in. For me, Philadelphia is a mess, and I don't know how they fix that. And they're kind of, although I think they got a victory today, they've been in a place where if you fall too far down in the Eastern Conference, it can get weird. So they got to watch for that. So I think that that's a thing where of those 3 teams, I probably trust Milwaukee to finish the best of the 3. And that's kind of funny to say that because Milwaukee seemed like they were falling apart not too long ago.
So, Greg, what should this team do with Khalil Ware? We see what McCain is doing. We see what Dalton Knecht is doing. Now they kind of have similar roles in terms of they really have to go out there and help their team right now compared to Khalil Ware, where we have stacked up veterans like Kevin Love. We're trying to have Jovic out there. What do we do with Khalil Ware? Do you think he's ready? Do you think he should be getting more playing time? Where does he really fit on this roster?
It's a great question because it begs a bigger question of what the Heat should be prioritizing right now. Like, are they good enough to just be playing veterans, or should they be maximizing their young talent and letting those guys grow? And to your point about the other rookies in other situations, like Jared McCain's getting a lot of run, getting a lot of attempts, and Khalil Ware is buried in a rotation. At times, he was even behind Thomas Bryant. Luckily, that's not the case anymore. So it's just it exemplifies how much more Khalil Ware has to overcome to get in the relevant rotation versus a guy like McCain or the kid out in LA as well. He's been playing very well. I think that it's a situation where You have to be patient with him. The Heat have hit on their draft picks recently. They've done really well. So I trust that he's a functional, good player. The question is just going to be, can he contribute in the window that you have left with this core group of, and when I say core group, I think it's kind of the four guys that have been here since Jimmy arrived: Jimmy, Duncan, Bam, and Tyler Herro. Can Khalil Ware help that group? If the answer is no, it does kind of beg the question of, could you have picked a more NBA ready player, maybe at a position that you think you could have inserted and played right away? That'll be something Heat fans can debate. I think Ware eventually will be a functional, good player, but the ultimate marker for that, unfortunately for Miami, is going to be, can Bam and Ware play next to each other? And if the answer is no, Heat fans are going to ultimately not love that was the direction they went on draft night.
Now with Bam Adebayo, listen, I'm a huge Bam Adebayo guy as well, because what he's been able to do at 6'9", undersized, with the roster that he's been given compared to all these other teams that have, all these great defenders around them. What do you think is going on with Bam Adebayo? Because, they've crowned him king. They've crowned him as the franchise guy. But then at the same time, it seems like he's regressing. I know we have a new offense, and of course that's going to take some time to get adjusted to, but especially on the offensive end, when we need him to score, when we need him to be aggressive, he still seems like passive. He's not really, stepping up like how we would think that he would, especially coming off of the Olympics. So what do you think is going on with Bam Adebayo?
So Bam started out the season struggling. And to your point about like being a big Bam guy, I coined the phrase "no ceiling" for a reason. I love what Bam Adebayo brings to the game. I think he is a pillar of the franchise. There's no bigger fan of Bam Adebayo than I. He's right behind me, dunking on a Boston Celtic. If you can see, I'll move my head there. I always like to make sure and rub that in whenever we can dunk on a Celtic. Anyway, back to this. This is the thing with Bam. I was really surprised by the way the season started, because the preseason looked like he had figured some stuff out. The Olympics seemed like he had figured some stuff out. And then it all went out the window as the regular season started. And so that was confusing. And it was the first time that I can remember Bam's offense impacting his defense. Usually, he could be struggling offensively and the defense is still there. Early this year, it was the one weird moment where I feel like you could see that it was impacting. But this is the good news. They've played 9 games in November. So they've turned the page from October to November. And in those 9 games, in 38 minutes, he's averaging almost 19 points. He's averaging 10 rebounds and 4 assists. That's more like the Bam Adebayo that we're looking for versus the early season numbers in October where he was at 11 points and 7 rebounds. That's not enough. So I think what you're seeing is an incline in his production now. They're going to start to figure him out more and more. I think inserting Duncan Robinson into more lineups with Tyler Herro, those two guys specifically with Bam, is going to help get him back on track. And whether Heat fans like it or not, Bam is going nowhere. He is a pillar of this franchise. They've committed to him being kind of the torchbearer of what they call Heat culture. And so it's just a matter of him getting back on track. And I have no doubt that he will, because he's starting to show it in November by the numbers.
For sure. So speaking of a player, though, that's actually progressing and not regressing. So Tyler Herro, his growth has been amazing so far this season. He's been our best offensive player, not all around player, but I'll still give that to Bam, especially the last week or so, because he's obviously been stepping up defensively. But Tyler has been one of our best players this season, and I'm happy for Tyler. He's one of the most polarizing players. I'm not a Tyler hater, but I will critique him when he's playing bad. I'll critique anybody when they're playing bad. Like, this is my favorite team. I'm obviously going to be biased, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But Tyler's growth, do you think it's going to be sustainable throughout the year? Because, again, the biggest thing with him is staying healthy. So he has been available, which is great so far within these 13 games. So can he sustain it through health? But consistency was the other part, because he started off last season with averaging 23 points per game or whatever it was in the first 8 games. And then he got hurt, which kind of derailed that progression. So, and he'll have those games where he will get you 25 points, but then he'll get you 10 the next game. And he hasn't had that. He's had one game perhaps where he had 15 games in that stretch of 8 games where he had 26, 27, 29, 30. But that was off of efficient shooting. Like, so it wasn't because he was chucking up shots and not inefficient. So do you think it's sustainable? And the second part to that question is, do you think because of this play, and if it is consistent throughout the year, do you think the Miami Heat are going to focus on building around him and Bam moving forward? Or do you think they'll say, hey, Tyler's really good right now. Jimmy might stay. We don't know what he's going to do with that player option next season. Like, should we trade him while he's hot right now? Kind of, right? While his value is kind of progressively gotten better, right? Because his value was down last season. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a loaded question because Tyler has answered in every possible way to all of the question marks, all the doubters. He has came in, they asked him to play an off-ball role, and he's mastered it. I mean, he's the best three-point shooter in the league. I think still he's number one in three-point percentage, at least. But also his efficiency measures across the board, all the metrics show he's having the best offensive season of his career. The question will be, and I, as you were talking and you said Tyler Herro has been available so far, I went to knock on wood as you were talking because I'm like, yo, we got to do something to make sure that we keep that aligned because that's the whole thing here. Tyler has to be available. If Tyler is available, I think he can sustain this play. But like as Pat called him fragile in the post-game presser,
Right.
He's got to prove it by remaining available. And unfortunately, like he's in a season where Heat fans are not going to give him the casual Heat fan loves Tyler Herro. Like that's something we should clear up. Like the real diehard fans that watch every transaction and every move, they're a little more critical of Tyler. The people who go to the games and just rock a jersey and cheer for the team, they love Tyler Herro. So like they're not even thinking of this. But for Tyler to really get the buy-in from the hardcore fan, they need to see it in the playoffs. So that means he needs to be available throughout the rest of the season. I think it is sustainable. It's just a matter of him staying healthy. I don't know how much you can predict health. So I'm a little afraid to be like, yeah, he's going to do it. I want him to do it because I do think he becomes a player that you can build around in the sense that if you get another offensive engine, he can play off ball now and be productive. So you don't need to say, Tyler, carry our offense necessarily. That's not the recipe in my eyes. So I think he can be a building block if he continues to play this way. But this is good. This is a prove it year for not just Tyler Herro, but Jimmy Butler as well. If you're not available, I think the Heat say sayonara. But if you're available, I think that the Heat are interested in you sticking around. And that's a interesting moment for the Heat organization to be in. But that's what they have kind of broadcasted, Pat Riley being the loudest among them.
Yeah, his shot profile has changed, which has been interesting. Like his free throws per game, like always like 1.8, 2.2, 2.4. And he's up to almost 4 if you round up. Like, so that's a new element there. And obviously his profile is no more mid-range shots, which is kind of crazy. Like he's actually getting to the rim versus doing that early floater, which has gotten him in trouble and got him injured multiple times. But like he's actually taking that extra dribble. He has that muscle that he added on, and he's actually finishing at the rim and then obviously shooting 46% or whatever it is from 48% at one point, which is just unreal. Like that's obviously going to regress to the mean, but like if he's shooting 43%, 4 times to the free throw line per game, maybe 5, finishing at the rack, like I agree with you. As long as he's healthy, he should be fine. So go ahead, Martel, hop in.
So you talked about being available. And don't you already think that Pat Riley was already right when it comes to Jimmy Butler? Now, I know he got hurt and he rolled his ankle, and tomorrow he's questionable, like with an illness. What do we do with Jimmy Butler going forward? Only because do you also believe in paying players for what they've done in the past when they already technically gave him his money? They gave him $150 million already, But then also, too, there's a lot of Miami Heat fans that will also argue that the Miami Heat never really got Jimmy Butler the help, which I kind of think is 50-50, like when it comes to injuries. And then at the same time, I think they took the undrafted thing just a little bit too far. So what do we do with Jimmy Butler going forward? And do you think over this Jimmy Butler run, has the Miami Heat given him enough help?
Oh, those are 2 huge questions. Let's tackle the help question first. I would just say this. maybe they like the Dame trade is the one that's always going to stick out for me. Okay. Like, I don't care what anyone says, and people in the organization will say Portland never even gave us a chance to negotiate. I don't care. You don't get a pass from me. That was the move you had to make, and they didn't get that done. But independent of that, when people say Jimmy has not had enough help, I often want to remind everybody that the prized free agent signing of 2021 was, and I think 2021 is the year, don't quote me on that. Kyle Lowry was the guy. Jimmy asked for him specifically, like went to the organization and said, get my guy. And they got his guy.
So hold on, Greg, because I always talk about this and they always say stop talking about it. Why did Jimmy not get on Kyle Lowry the same way that he would get on Bam, the same way he would get on Duncan and everybody else? He brought Kyle Lowry over here, and all Kyle Lowry, he was doing the opposite of everything. He knew this was Heat culture. He knew that. Now, I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, you know, he was never in shape, this, that, and the third. He knew where he was coming.
Correct.
And you know what I'm saying? And Jimmy brought him over here and never held him accountable. And even when they were going to trade him, I think maybe like 2 years ago, right? When Jimmy went to the podium, he whispered in a mic and said, Kyle Lowry's not going anywhere.
Yeah. No, and it's a situation, and Kyle ended up getting traded. So it's a weird scenario where you would have thought he would have came, understood what he was buying into, and it would have been a seamless fit because Jimmy is bringing him in. Like when we think back to when Dwayne brought in people, they were bought in immediately. Or like when not just Dwayne, but the big three brought in guys like Shane, like, you know, whoever when Birdman came in, everyone knew what time it was. And it seemed a little bit like Kyle came into a situation and then was like, whoa, the standards are like this. I'm not trying to get into all this. You're being a little bit too dramatic with the body fat tests and all of the stuff you have to do physically to be in shape. And it's just a weird situation where I just think people need to keep perspective in that they have tried to do right by Jimmy. The only player that Jimmy Butler to this day probably would argue with the franchise that they should have kept was PJ Tucker, although he would be wrong because PJ Tucker has been awful since he left. That's a guy that I think Jimmy really wanted them to keep at least for one more year, and they did not. So that the getting him enough help, I think that he's had enough help to get to 2 finals, another conference finals. So that's big. The bigger question about like what they do going forward, I think you got to let the season play out. You have to see if he's available.
Now, but that's the thing. It's like he's already missing all these different games, you know. And to be honest, I know we have, you know, all these marginal pieces with Burks, you know, we have Pella, but this team still goes as far as Jimmy Butler takes them. So when it comes to the rotation, I think that, you know, Spo's also been struggling with the rotation a little bit. Why is Josh Richardson playing 20 minutes a game? I don't know why. So what is your starting lineup? You know, Terry Rozier, he may or may not be back tomorrow. So how do we move forward with this starting lineup just so that we can build some chemistry for the next few games? Because, you know, like I just feel like with this Heat team, we're constantly changing the lineup. Guys are constantly in and out. So we really can't build that momentum over a course of multiple games.
Yeah, I hope that the lineup that they rolled out with Tyler and Duncan in the backcourt, Haywood Highsmith and Jimmy and Bam is what they roll with. I think that is the lineup that is going to be the most they've played together the longest, and you also the pieces kind of complement each other well enough. I think that Haywood and Jimmy and Bam cover up Duncan and Tyler defensively enough. And then you also are kind of putting Terry in this role to be more of the guy he was in Charlotte, where he's super on ball, gets to like create and do all that stuff off the bench with Jaime. And maybe that's like how you try to figure this thing out to work. Like that's my view on it. This is the starting lineup that I wanted to happen. I hope that Terry doesn't start. I think that this is a great opportunity for Spoelstra to say, you were playing hurt. We're going to bring you off the bench because we've just won a game with this starting lineup, and let's see what happens. I think Terry will be open to it. I hope that that's what happens. I have not got an indication yet of which way Spoelstra is going to lean tomorrow against Dallas.
Yeah, with that lineup, so Jimmy, Bam, Duncan, Haywood, and Tyler, their offensive rating is 123.5. And it's funny because last season, when Terry was finally acclimated and got hot for those last 2 weeks before he had that neck injury, most fans were saying we want Tyler to come off the bench and put Duncan in the starting lineup. Right now, it's like, okay, now it's the opposite. Tyler's obviously developed, playing really well. Terry is struggling. I know you and Ethan, I haven't watched the episode yet, but everybody go check out that episode. I know you guys did an episode on Terry Rozier, what they should do with him moving forward. So I'll check that out after this. But my question related to this, though, is who do you think? I care more about the closing lineup. Like, I can care less about the starting lineup. But do you think that starting lineup will be the closing lineup? Or do you see Terry, if he's healthy, I don't know what kind of injury he's dealing with this foot injury, how the severity of it, whatever. But would you rather see that starting lineup also close, or do you think a Jaime or maybe a Terry can replace Duncan? Because I would still want to keep Jimmy, Bam, Haywood, and Tyler in there, in my opinion. So I'm not sure who I want in there, but it could be Jaime, it could be Duncan, it could be Terry. But like, what are your thoughts on the closing lineup? And we can close after this.
It's unfortunate to say this because I was so in favor of the trade when it happened, and probably it was because I had my Kyle Lowry goggles on and I just wanted him off the roster so bad. So when Terry came, I was so excited for him. But truthfully, of those guys, I think that it is Duncan on the nights he's hot. And if not, you just roll with Jaime, who can create a little bit more and is a little bit bigger. That would be your closing lineup. I don't think the starters would close. So, it would likely be, instead of Duncan, Jaime in there. But with the other four that you mentioned, I don't think Terry cracks the lineup to close. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he proves me wrong. That would be a cool story, is that like Terry Rozier finds his role as an NBA player, and maybe it's an off the bench type role where, he is like a Lou Will type that comes in and gets you buckets and then sits back down and maybe can facilitate even a little bit more than Lou Will was able to. That would be a really dope story for Terry, but it's a lot to bank on someone figuring that out this quickly. So for me, it's either Duncan on the nights he's hot, Jaime Jaquez when he's not.
I agree. It also, with Spo, it always depends on matchups too. So there's all these different variables. So I mean, Terry was closing for a while, like out there when he was out there defensively, and we're like, why is Haywood not in, or even Josh? Like, you give Josh 21 minutes, but Josh is 6'5". He's a better defender than Terry, even though he's not having the best defensive year so far.
Just trust him.
Yeah, it's just a huge trust thing. So, but anyway, thank you so much for hopping on, Greg. We really appreciate it. Obviously, all our followers, I'm assuming, follow the 5 Reasons Sports Network, but do you want to let the audience know where they can find you?
Yeah, for sure. So 5 Reasons Sports Network is on all your social media platforms, but the podcast you should find is 5 on the Floor. That is our daily insider show on the Miami Heat. We try to have episodes up every single day. So wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube, check out 5 on the Floor. And follow me on Twitter at Greg Sylvander. I'm also, I'm on Blue Sky too, so you can come over there as well. And that's it. I appreciate you guys having me. We got to do this again as the season progresses and check ourselves and see if our theories and our predictions and our hot takes came to fruition, or if we look funny in retrospect.
Thank you so much again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.